Thank you all for coming, for turning up for this session. There is no chair. I am everything in a box, so it's me. My name's Nicholas Dulake. I'm an industrial designer from Sheffield in England. I work for Sheffield Hallam University. I also work for a consultancy that the university own, and I also teach as well. So I sort of spread my time across research, teaching, and consultancy. I'm going to talk to you today about some work that we've done in a project called Mesh. And in a nutshell, it's bringing together the material and digital to create connections between on-site and online experiences. That was the program of work that was set up. It was an EU-funded project. It's still ongoing, and we sort of finished in January. So I'm going to talk to you today about my interest in that project, which is the design side of the work. We've got a couple of case studies and a bit of around co-design, and showing you some videos around that. This is the structural diagram of Mesh and what it's trying to do, and it's trying to enable a sort of a richer, more tangible experience within a museum using smart objects that can interpret the movement maybe through the museum and influence our online catalogue afterwards. It can reach out to places like Europeana and Flickr to make suggestions. And this is all driven through a cloud-based system that the curator can use and doesn't necessarily have to have a high level of technological interest or ability. So one of the first case studies I'm going to talk to you about, I'm just going to briefly give you an overview of both case studies, is the Atlantic Wall in Den Haag. And this was a 6-month temporary exhibition in the Science Museum in The Hague. And they are one of the partners within the consortium for the project. So their curators were part of this process, part of the co-design process. And similar, another exhibition which is now in their permanent collection, which is Voices of Fort Zacchio. And again, the curator was involved in the whole process, the co-design process. So why co-design? Well, we feel within this project that it gives everybody a voice, everybody a chance, and gives empowerment to everybody at the time of the origination of the conceptual, the research, of the development. And we use it as a tool to allow people to have a voice. I'm just going to show you a very quick video of a co-design session that was done in the Netherlands, which was set up. I have to give you a bit of preamble to it. It was set up, the technology was set up like a market stall. So there was 4 people, and they were basically selling technology. And the curators were asked to come with an object and buy into a piece of technology. They didn't really have to buy into it personally in the sense of how to use it. There was people to facilitate that. But they needed to buy into the idea of maybe what that technology could do for the object they have. Okay? So you'll see the first bit of it is about people just basically trying to explain what the technology is, and then unfortunately, the sound drops out in the second half, so I'll tell you what the concepts are. I'll do a voiceover. But I think it puts a good light of maybe what a co-design session would look like.
As I touch it, I can reveal different layers of the object. Let's say if it's a painting and there might be different layers because they were repainted and such, I could kind of...
So at this point, he's trying to sell his technology that he's brought to the curator.
So it's really just, we wanted to just demonstrate this prototype.
The content could be developed to link to another point, and then to another point, and to another point in the museum. So you create your path. So a more sophisticated version of this could be that it could guide you automatically. You wouldn't have to necessarily know where you're going. It could go from one to another to another. It's good to say at this point, we're trying to sell the technology with our only assumptions in it. And the curators made up their own assumptions, which was really quite powerful. So the end result of what they came up with was completely different from how we were pitching it, how we were selling it.
It's called the loop. It can give other layers of content, and we have a little demo with our personal collection.
Yourself, I mean, the whole physical interaction of this is adding something. I mean, it's really important.
Well, that's the adding.
Waarom krijg ik nou niet het hoofd? Maar do I not get the head?
Check it again. Okay, and then
I have to place it really on that.
yeah, if the mummy was full size, it would work better.
Yeah, I
That's
understand.
smaller.
Yes.
So I have to match it. Yeah. Oh, nice.
I'm not sure if I understand what you...
So the curator that I worked with brought this Roman's helmet, and he wanted to illustrate the idea of a centurion in different states. So feasting, sleeping, marching. So the device that she's holding in her hand at the moment is a haptic device that could beat the heartbeat of the soldier along with sound. So it was an idea that you could get immersed in the idea of the soldier, what he's doing by having that heartbeat running through. And this is augmented reality, peeling away the layers of an object. So I think leading on from that, the idea was that we sort of, technology, we try and sort of, we know about it and so on. And maybe people that don't know about technology within the museum structure actually have the best voice to say what can be done with it, because it's about the human interaction, not the technology. And that example there of that workshop was about people buying into it and seeing what they could do with it instead of us enforcing what we wanted them to do with it. So the part of the co-design, that collaboration worked really well. So throughout this process, throughout this project, we've used sort of standard design processes. We're looking sort of immersion, research, creation, realization, refinement and deployment. So these are real world applications. They've been built, they've been installed into museums, they've been tested, tried, and that data we've got back. So another part that we used in this is to use the artifact, use the thing that we're creating to synchronize people within the co-design process. So this diagram shows we have the technology, we have the designer, we have the curator. At the beginning, they come together, and it's sort of a jumble. It's sort of a dialogue, a waltz around what could be done. And as they sort of break out and come back together again, that artifact, that idea of what that could be, becomes closer. And again, and you go through iterations of this. And we found that within this project, it's worked very well. So the first case study I'm going to talk to you about is the Haag and the Atlantic Wall. As I said before, it was a temporary exhibition running over 6 months. The inspiration came from a short intervention that we did, which was how to get objects out of storage in museums. The museum picked 20 objects. Over the course of 2 months, we had them in a case. And these cases have distance sensors on the front, and they all have Twitter handles. And the combination of those two data sets meant that at the end of every week, an object went back down and another one came up until there was a clear winner. And I think the winner was a pair of Chinese binding shoes, very, very small pair of shoes. The detail on them was quite amazing, and I think people had to get very close to the case to see, the detail of it. So the inspiration came from there, and leading on from that, we had a two-day workshop in Sheffield with curators, with technologists, with social scientists, and we sort of sat in a creative space and we talked through what that inspiration, what that idea could then do within this new exhibition that they wanted to put on. The result of that session was that they wanted to show different voices from The Hague. Does anybody know about the Atlantic Wall in The Hague, or the Atlantic Wall generally itself? So the Atlantic Wall was a huge defence system that Hitler put up at the end of World War II. And what it happened in places like The Hague is that it destroyed great big avenues of the city because it was taken out for tank traps and so on. And the whole city was divided because you had the Dutch civilian that was suffering, you had the civil servant that was working in alliance with the German soldiers, you had the German soldiers themselves. So it really was a quite divisive story to tell. And the museum was sort of like, we really would love to tell this in a way that we can have all of those voices talking and someone can walk through that. So the next thing was that they wanted it to start by having physical objects. So we've put replicas up there, and I'll show you some more of those in a minute. Sound clips and images from archives based on oral history. So it was sort of fact, but emotive fact, like my neighbour was taken away and we had our house knocked down and so on and so forth. And also choice of language. So they wanted it in Dutch and English. So the starting point for the exhibition, it was 400 metres squared. The floor plan wanted to reflect The Hague itself. They wanted to be able to have a way of getting people from the museum, the points in the museum, to the places in The Hague. They wanted the connection. At the time, there was a walking map, a walking route going on to say, you know, if you're interested in this, go have a look at this, and so on. So, and they wanted to connect the past with the present, so that's the same thing. No fixed route as well. So the requirement for us, for the technology, or for the embedding the technology, was it was fully integrated, but possible to have a visit without it. You didn't necessarily need to. You could still understand the context of what was going on. So there was two parts to our involvement in this. One was the activation hardware, and you'll see that more in a minute. And the other was around the replica and how to produce physical objects to trigger activation of content. So this is sort of development of activation hardware. You can sort of see in the left-hand picture, sort of moving up the picture, is the sort of development steps that we took in testing, and this was very rapid. This was done within sort of 6-7 months from brainstorming, co-design session to installation. And you can see on the right-hand side is a startup of an installation session in the actual museum. So the replicas, now it's interesting because these are sort of like poor relations to other things in the museums. They don't really get to see the light of day. We have a book, starting from left to right, a book on how to talk to the Dutch in German. So it's sort of a translation book, how to be nice to the Dutch. We have a Delft mug used by a soldier. We have an armband that was used by a civil servant, maybe on a crossing. We have a pass that allowed you to go from one side of the city to the other. We have, for the civilians, we have surrogate tea, which was made up of all sorts of things, but not tea, and surrogate sugar as well. And these, we felt, represented quite a nice way of reproducing objects, but also a nice way of having objects that's sort of like everyday objects. They're not glamorous objects, but they meant quite a lot to the people that were using them. So they had that sort of emotional connection to them. They had an earthy quality to them. So we recreated these. We went through a process of looking at each one of these objects and how can we recreate it to be a smart object? How can we create something that will activate content? So I've got a little selection of some of these objects down here afterwards, and if you're interested, you can come up and have a look at them. But they're made from pretty similar materials to what the originals were made for, short of the 3D printed mug, obviously. But using heavy-duty cartridge paper, using that quality, allowing them to degrade, allowing them to be replaced, they were not meant to be permanent for the whole exhibition. We wanted them to get shabby, we wanted them to degrade. So you can see here the replicas in front of the actual originals. And we used really quick techniques, things like photography, just to take a photograph, lift that photograph, make a wrap, and away you go. Use things that gave the objects weight and sound, so it would feel like maybe there's some sugar in there. You know? We used tea in the surrogate tea bags to give a scent to the tea bags and give a weight to them. So it was all about trying to give an idea that these objects had been crafted, had been put together. There was some manual craft input into the creation of these objects. The same way with the originals. And this went into a kit form. So we actually asked the curators, would you be happy to do just-in-time assemblage of these smart objects? And they went, yeah, okay, okay, you make the kits and we'll assemble them as and when we need them. So the sugar consists of a standard box that we found that was pretty much damn on the right sort of size box, a piece of wood, but small enough to rattle, so you had a nice weight to it, but you had that movement inside the box. An NFC tag, a wrap, some double-sided tape, and a glue gun. And you have a smart object. And we sent them a little training video so they knew how to do it. On the right-hand side, we have a pass. And what we did, we stripped away all the information from that pass, and then allowed the curators to build it up. So the stamps, the signature, each one was individual. They were not just duplicates of the other. We thought that was really important. So each one of those replicas, it held a story. So it activated a story as you went round. So the mug was for the soldier in German, and in English it was the dictionary, the armband for the civil servant, and the official for the pass, and the tea for the civilian, and in English the surrogate sugar. And because all of these are smart objects, we could track all of the history of these objects. So we could tell how many times they were used, how many sessions, how much content was played in those sessions. We asked for no data, no email addresses. If an object wasn't used for a certain period of time, it wiped itself and then was put back into the pool. So it was a very simple way of delivering data. And you can see how they're arranged in the museum. So people can just come in, pick up any narrative they wanted to, walk around the exhibition, listen to that. And we had multiple people taking one maybe. Some took two at a time to listen to maybe the civilian and the soldier at the same time so that they could get a comparison. We had groups that took different ones and then discussed about the soldier and the civilian and what was going on. And at the end of that, there was a checkout station, and you would put your smart object down on that checkout station, and it would give you a printed card that had the top three, the three places that you spent the most time. And actually on the back, there was a map of The Hague saying, you like these places, you seem to like the content that we were playing you. Go check out physically, go out the museum, go have a look in The Hague. So that was a nice sort of end result. It sort of worked, sort of not. The uptake was, I think, about 20% of people that actually started a session checked out, so there was something not quite going on there. But the ones that did check out sort of all end up with this data souvenir of their visit. So I'm just going to show you a quick video of the actual exhibition.
Welcome to the museum. Welcome to the Atlantic Wall exhibition. The exhibition, The Hague and the Atlantic Wall, explores the impact of the Atlantic Wall structure on the city of The Hague during the war and what it meant for civilians and all people living here. And it also explores what it meant for the identity of the city after the war. At the beginning of the exhibition, you can choose from what perspective you want to visit the exhibition. And that's where the mesh technology comes in.
Ja, aan het begin van de expositie zie je een aantal voorwerpen die je kunt uitkiezen. En dat zijn dus bonkaarten bijvoorbeeld en rantsoenering. En dan hoor je, als je dat op die verlichte schijf zet, hoor je alles over dat betreffende onderwerp. Ik heb deze Duits aandoende bierpul gekozen, omdat ik ook wel eens even het Duitse standpunt wil horen. De Duitse propaganda interesseert mij ook. Wat hebben ze en hoe hebben ze dat verwoord?
So the object I chose was this one, which was lots of Dutch civilians talking about their experience during the war. And it was great because actually you hear all these personal stories, and I think you get far more than you would do just going around and reading it. And it was really helpful as well because you've got the voice in your ear, but also you can see different things on the screen, and the two go together. So you kind of build up an audio-visual picture of what was happening at the time. So I found it really easy to use. It's good.
Ik vind het een ingenieus idee. Hoe komt iemand erop om dat zo te maken dat iedereen voor zichzelf dat verhaal kan horen?
The perspective you choose makes your visit very different. And you could say your mesh replica is a tool with which you dive into the stream of history with all kinds of different perspectives, incidents, different opinions, and also different experiences.
So after it's been running for a while, we did an evaluation of the exhibition. I had 4 different cameras over 9 days. There's quite a lot of video taken, and there was a sort of a conversation at the smart replica station. So a lot of it was observational. There was questionnaires done, follow-up questionnaires, and the total number of visitors on the data object sessions that we have, so the logged data from the objects that we have is the 14,853. The estimate for the exhibition was about 20 to 22,000 people through the door. It's very difficult to tell because it's a temporary exhibition. They have to pay to get into the whole museum, so you can't really track them from that point onwards. So each point had about 2 to 3 minutes of content, and the average was, the 48.5. The breakdown was quite interesting, with the civil servant being the clear loser in this scenario. People were very interested, very close on the soldier and civilian, and listening to those two sides of the story. So quite, valuable information really for the museum. Attendance times. About average, a little bit more, between 30 and 60 minutes would you expect for a temporary exhibition. And they did 2 appreciation scores, one with the replica, one without, and the one with the replica came up 0.2, so it was 8 with the replicas and 7.8 afterwards. The interesting thing from me, from designing the replicas, is looking how they were used and looking at the averages of how they're used and the sort of the wear pattern. So if you look at the 2 mugs that we have there, one was used 58 times and played 347 pieces of content, which is an average about 5.7, around that sort of figure. And then the next mug next to it, 303 and 1,737, which is about the same average. So the mugs, however they were being used, the objects were being used in the box, people weren't really taking them on their look, because the one on the edge had sort of been destroyed, it started to fade, it started to sort of, the labelling had peeled off, and actually it was being used just about as much as the one that was pristine. So that's quite interesting from a design point of view. We're still analysing those figures. The next case study I want to talk to you is something quite different. That was sort of indoor, lots of infrastructure, lots of networking and power and all the lovely things that we, no water, no rain. Going to this place, which is Fort Porzacchio, it's in northern Italy. It's not far from a place called Rovereto, and it's on the sort of Austrian-Hungarian border where quite a lot of fighting was around the World War I. And this was a fort that was built but never used, which seems strange because it's a huge fort. But it was never sort of occupied. It was sort of left before lines shifted, and it was left and it was not used. But it was used by the people in the valley. It was used for storing sheep. It was used for lovers to go up to. It was used for kids to make camps in. So it was used for lots of different things. It was used by looters to take all the steel out of it. It was used for different things. So the idea behind this is, how do we tell the story of this fort? So the inspiration came from a previous piece of work that we did with the museum, which was around trenches and outdoor exploration of trenches and giving stories that weren't necessarily factual stories, but maybe poetry or about women in the trenches and so on, and taking them to places where they have that vista, where they have the connection with the sort of the landscape or the trench itself. And we made some devices that allowed you sort of to walk around those trenches. So here we've got a sort of a gun belt inspired by what this chap might have been wearing, and a bunch of cards that you could actually slip into this gun belt, and it would play that narrative as you walk around. And you can easily just take it out and put another one in and have the same narrative. So very simple interactions. So we had a brainstorming session, which was a 2-day brainstorming session, and we felt that sort of that format was really important because it allowed people over the nighttime to have a sort of a reflective period away from everybody else. The original diagram of sort of all this mess going on, and then sort of being able to break out from that to reflect on actually maybe your own practice or your own sort of needs or requirements, and then come back together as a group and be able to actually feel that you can voice those within that group. So we created that space for, again, curators and the tech guys and the designers, and we after the first day we didn't have a good concept. It was not really a good day, and some days within that sort of sessions you have maybe people that maybe have their own line of thought and they can't get off that line of thought, or it just doesn't gel. So we all went away and came back the next morning, and actually the interesting bit was there was a lot of resolution overnight. There was a lot of, and the voice of the curator came through. And the idea was, I just want something simple. I want to tell a story through time, and I want it to be a simple interaction that people can understand. I don't want to complicate things. Can we do that? And for us, it's like, yes, we can. That's no problem. There was lots of other stuff going on around the sort of the actual technical problems of the networks and the designing for outdoors, basically, and all those things that you have to look at. So it was a quite a refreshing point to say, just let's dial it back. We don't want to maybe make it really complicated. So the fort itself, as you can see, there's some more pictures here, is based on multiple levels. And the guys from Italy went back to Italy, and they chose 3 points within the fort that they wanted to put these sort of interactions in, these timelines. And we thought, right, okay, well, we need to test. We need to go out there. We need to test in situ. It's really important that we produce sort of very quick prototypes. So these are RP'd, bit of laser cut wood. We've got some sort of physical objects to activate it with NFC cards in. We made multiples of these, and we went out there and we tested in situ. We quickly realized that it was going to be quite a difficult job to get any sort of networking. We had 3 rooms that were very different, far away from each other. There was water coming through the roof when it rained. Pretty much a designer's worst nightmare, to be fair, on where to design for. So we went through that process. We came back to England and we were in sort of honest communication with all the people involved in the co-design session of sending around very quick sketches, ideas of how that we could put this thing together. This was done over a very short period of time, so maybe less than 6 months, so 4 to 6 months, and not full-time work either, just sort of maybe 1 or 2 days a week on the design worker side of things. And it was multiple things. So there needed to be stations where the content was played, but also a check-in station where you would pick up your activation and drop it back off. So this is a quick video of how it ended up. You realize in the video that the place looks very different from what the photographs I've shown you. I'll tell you afterwards why that is.
Mio zio raccontava che alla costruzione del forte e al tracciato della strada lavoravano molti operai, forse 200, facendo 2 turni di 12 ore.
So the first station was animations about the creation of the fort, how it was used afterwards, how it was used by the valley. These were simple, very black and white animations. The second
Sono partito il 1 agosto 1914. Eravamo sul Stauda a falciare il fieno. Quando venne mia
out over the valley, so you would have that view, and you would be sort of posed to stand in that position because of the stone and the way that the system worked to view. And the last is stories of the soldiers that either worked there, creating it, digging it out, that were in a garrison next to it before they were meant to occupy it.
La mia sezione mitragliatrici con 2 compagnie del 72esimo Reggimento Fanteria.
As she's been walking around, that pebble that she has in her hand has actually logged all of those points where she's been. And when she gives it back to the receptionist, she gets another data souvenir that sums up her visit. So the part of activation for this project, for this case study, was driven through sort of a small handheld pebble that was created in a way and designed in a way that it wanted to be a tactile weight in your hand, something that you felt that you were carrying around. We were restricted by technology in one sense, because embedding an NFC tag into something and having it a big distance away from the reader doesn't always work. So we were sort of in this bridge of consistency, reliability, but something that wasn't compromised by that, something that was malleable in the hand that you could fiddle with as you walked around, so that you felt that you had constant engagement with what was going on. So I need to tell you the story of why that's different. So Italian law is quite a funny thing. And the museum that we were working with they look after the fort. And within the region, that's sort of well known, and that's sort of written down, and that's all. So, we had permission to install that equipment into the fort. Higher up, somebody else had given the architects full veto on anything going into the fort. So we got to the point where we were 2 weeks away from installation, and we basically found out that we couldn't install into there because higher up the chain. So, but you know, we never got to find out what it would have been like there. But actually, it worked really well where they put it. It's a similar sort of place. It's a air raid shelter underneath a castle in Rovereto. Quite accessible for people, so they had a lot more people go through the doors. The fort is about 1.5 miles away from the car park, so you have to walk up a dirt track to get to it, and so on. So, sort of their loss, our gain, I think, on this front. So that was sort of the two case studies, and we got feedback on the Pebble, and we got feedback on the designs that we did. And this is all sort of fed into a tool that we've created, a cloud tool, mesh cloud tool, which allows curators, artists, designers to author their own sort of Internet of Things experiences. So these are just a few screenshots. I've actually got some stuff set up, and I can show you a little bit about it afterwards. We've got some time after I finish the presentation. You can see here it's a system that allows you to upload content. You can tag it to activation, and then you deploy it down to sort of Internet of Things, Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, and so on. And this also leads into the other side of the system is the sort of off-site, online, what you missed. You know, we're logging this information at museums, so we can upload that to the cloud, and we have a visualization for the visitor that says, you may have missed this, you may be interested in this, Europeana has this information on these objects that are in that collection, and so on. We also created a sort of a prototype Tinker kit that allowed, that goes with the cloud system, that allows you to produce augmented reality systems and NFC systems, and there's a little thermal printer in there and some Bluetooth beacons. So you can do those recipes and create little kits. And this all works, there's a platform underneath that unifies all things like Raspberry Pis and NFC readers and so on. So I think for me, just to sum up my experience using sort of co-design and in museums and in heritage, and it's something we're still continuing to do now with new clients that come through the door, is this idea that, you know, the combination of knowledge at the beginning of any adventure really, I think, really makes the outcome much, much richer. And also the engagement of people within that system. They're engaged, they have ownership, they are guardians of what they have created because they've been involved. So thank you very much for coming. If you'd like to come and have a look at some of the objects, I can show you a little bit how it works. Yes. Oh, there's some questions, yes.
Do you ever include your visitors in the co-creation process?
For this project, we did not, because we used the curators as the portal to the visitors. So that's the way that it was set up. We've used the visitors in assessments afterwards, as in for surveys and so on, but it was outside of the realms of this project. I think going forwards, yes, we will, definitely. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.